The image flickered on the screen, capturing the glow of an ongoing award ceremony. The host spoke enthusiastically, highlighting the presence of two women whose accomplishments had moved and inspired a nation. With a dismissive glance, the millionaire watched the scene, unaware of the shock that was about to come. He barely paid attention, lost in other thoughts, until the host announced their names. And then, in a frozen instant, everything changed. He felt an immediate wave of recognition. The two women, now in the spotlight, were his ex-wife and his daughter, whom he had driven out of his home years before. The wife he had left in poverty, the daughter he had barely known, both acclaimed and revered before an enthusiastic audience. These were the women he had considered a burden and discarded without hesitation, now on the screen with the world at their feet. The shock made him pull back, his chest tightening. He felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Guilt, maybe even regret, as if everything he had built was suddenly crumbling. How had they reached this point? Who had helped them? Why were they being celebrated so highly? He felt lost, perplexed, and a bitter question lingered over him. What had he lost by leaving them behind? The host's voice continued describing the journey of the two, a story of overcoming adversity and resilience that had captivated the country. The audience applauded, and he noticed the firm and radiant smile of his ex-wife, the same smile she had when he first met her. Beside her, the daughter looked at her mother with admiration, radiating confidence. He could barely comprehend what he saw. Both looked so different, as if suffering had shaped an indomitable strength within them. Closing his eyes, he was overwhelmed by memories of the past. So many recollections he had tried to erase now came flooding back, mercilessly. The present image faded as he was transported back to the beginning of a story he never imagined would be displayed before the world like this. The story flashes back years earlier, when the millionaire was just a young man with grand aspirations. Coming from a modest family, he had grown up amid difficulties, but his ambition had always set him apart. He had an insatiable thirst for success and believed that one day he would become a powerful man. During this period, he met the woman who would become his wife. She was a charming young woman with an easy smile and a generous spirit. Soon they realized they shared common dreams, building a better life, escaping the limitations of poverty, and creating something they could both call success. In the early years, they lived modestly in a small rented apartment, barely decorated and furnished with old furniture. What they lacked in material comfort, they made up for with mutual support and a shared drive to succeed together. She worked 2 jobs, and he took on long hours, chasing contracts and fighting to establish a name for himself. Every achievement, no matter how small, was celebrated as a shared victory. They envisioned a future with their own home, children, and a comfortable life. Her dream was to build a solid family. His was to see his name associated with power and prestige. As time passed, fortune seemed to smile upon him. He landed his first major contract, and the money began to flow more regularly. His income grew month by month, and for the first time, he started to experience a taste for luxury. At first, it was a new sensation, but soon he became addicted. Every success at work drew him further from the simplicity of his roots and, gradually, even from his wife. Instead of celebrating together the success they had both longed for, he began to view his achievements as personal triumphs, something he alone had accomplished, and that, in his eyes, his wife might not even be able to understand. She noticed the change. With every step he took toward success, he seemed to lose a bit more of the warmth she once admired in him. He grew more demanding, impatient, and often cold toward her. Their conversations about the future, once full of shared dreams, now revolved around financial goals and his desire to gain prominence in society. He began surrounding himself with influential people, attending dinners and events where she felt out of place, as though she was no longer part of the life he was building. The wife tried to adapt, believing he would soon return to being the man she had married. However, the emotional distance between them only grew. She barely recognized her husband when he arrived home late, smelling of expensive places, talking about contracts and alliances as if they mattered more than anything else. It was as if he was living in a world where she and the simplicity of their union no longer had a place. A year later, she discovered she was pregnant. She hoped the news would bring some joy, perhaps rekindling the love between them. After all, the arrival of a child could be the bond to strengthen their relationship. But when she told her husband, she realized she was wrong. He listened in silence, without emotion, and showed no reaction of happiness. On the contrary, he seemed annoyed, as if a child were just another weight on his climb to the top. "Now isn't the best time for this," he said, almost as if he were talking about an unexpected expense. The pain she felt was deep, but she hid her tears, convincing herself that he was merely stressed from work and that he would soon change. However, things only got worse. He spent more and more time away from home and showed less and less interest in family life. The wife tried to get closer, to show him how much he meant to her, but he avoided her with excuses of fatigue and stress. When the baby was finally born, he showed up at the hospital out of mere obligation, holding the child with a cold indifference that tore her heart. The relationship, which had once been the foundation of their lives, now turned into a tense and distant coexistence. While she devoted herself to their daughter, he barely cared about the child's development. When she tried to talk about the baby, he quickly interrupted, changing the subject to discuss business and investments. She began to realize that, to him, success did not include family. The image of a wife and mother, which once seemed so important, was now nothing more than a burden. In his eyes, marriage and a child were distractions that limited his potential, obstacles to the prestigious man he wanted to become. She knew the distance between them was only growing, and although she still loved him, she began to prepare herself for a painful reality. Her husband was becoming someone unrecognizable, and her place beside him seemed more fragile with each passing day. The marriage, once rooted in companionship, was now filled with tension and indifference. While the wife tried to maintain harmony for the sake of their daughter, he became increasingly distant and impatient. Small disagreements turned into larger conflicts, and he barely hid the disdain with which he treated her. To him, his wife and daughter were distractions, a burden that clashed with his relentless pursuit of success. One evening, after a long day, he came home exhausted, but not from work. His irritation had a different source. He walked into the bedroom, and there she was, holding their sleeping daughter in her arms. The scene enraged him in a way he couldn't understand. Something inside him screamed that this wasn't the life he was meant to have, that all his efforts and investments weren't meant to support a family he viewed as a barrier to his growth. He started an argument, venting his frustrations and throwing the weight of his unfulfilled ambitions onto his wife. She tried to calm him, speaking patiently, but he cut her off with a coldness that left her speechless. "You're an anchor tied to my feet," he said mercilessly. "I carry you and this child on my back as if you were a burden." His words were sharp, devoid of any feeling, and each sentence sounded like a final judgment, as though he were freeing himself from a weight that had always held him back. She remained silent, clutching her daughter tighter, as if the little one was the last anchor keeping her standing. She tried to remind him of the sacrifices they'd made together to reach this life, but to him, none of that mattered anymore. He disregarded their shared memories, his expression showing only deep contempt. That night, the cruel decision that would change their lives was about to be made. In the middle of the argument, he raised his voice and declared without hesitation, "I want you out of here tomorrow. Take what you need, but don't expect anything from me. This chapter is over." His words were harsh, but to him, it felt like cutting the last tie, holding him to a life he no longer wanted. His expression was icy, devoid of compassion, as he turned and walked away, leaving mother and child paralyzed. The next morning, she realized he was serious. There was no more dialogue, no forgiveness. Knowing she couldn't beg, she packed her things in silence with a dignity that surprised him. Without a word, she took her daughter and left the house they had once called home. In her departure, she carried not only her child, but also a sense of betrayal and abandonment that would ignite her future strength. The door closed behind them, and he breathed a sigh of relief, convinced he was finally free to pursue the path he'd always wanted. The man who saw himself as destined for success never looked back, and didn't realize that, by freeing himself from the anchors he believed he had, he was also giving up something he would never get back. When the door closed behind them on that cold morning, the harsh reality settled upon mother and daughter. With a suitcase in one hand and her daughter in the other, the mother felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. In that moment, all they had was each other, and that would have to be enough. With no resources, no steady job, and no support from friends or close family, she knew the days ahead would be unimaginably difficult. But holding her daughter's small hand, she vowed to herself that she would do everything in her power to give her a dignified life. In the early days, they found refuge in shelters and small inns paid for with the little savings she had. However, the money quickly dwindled, and she soon realized it would be impossible to sustain themselves that way for long. She looked for work everywhere, but the jobs available were temporary and poorly paid, barely covering basic expenses. Nights were filled with uncertainty, and the sound of her daughter's stomach rumbling from hunger was a cruel reminder of their situation. One morning, after yet another sleepless night, she sat beside her daughter in the cramped room of a cheap boarding house and tried to explain the situation in the simplest way possible. "We'll get through this together, my little one. I know it seems hard, but I promise things will get better." Her daughter, innocent and trusting in her mother, simply nodded, clinging to her with a trust that the mother feared she might not deserve. That unwavering faith of the little girl was the fuel that kept her going, even when everything around her seemed to be falling apart. After many days of searching, she finally got a job at a small cafe, where she spent hours cleaning tables and washing dishes. The pay was low, and the hours exhausting, but she took the job with gratitude. She knew it was the first step towards something better. And as long as she could offer her daughter at least one decent meal a day, she felt she was making progress. Every penny she earned was saved carefully because she knew they might need a little extra for emergencies. The hardships were many. On days when work was scarce or when she fell ill and couldn't go in, despair knocked at the door. During winter, the cold became almost unbearable, and they relied on donated blankets and old clothes to stay warm. However, it was in these moments of greatest difficulty that the strength of mother and daughter shone brightest. Together they created small rituals to face the adversity, a whispered song before bed, an invented story to distract the mind, and above all, a tight hug that said, without words, that as long as they were together, they could endure anything. With time, her daughter started attending a public school. It was an achievement the mother considered a personal victory, as she wanted her daughter to have a different future, far from the poverty surrounding them. But the challenges continued. Without a proper uniform, her daughter was often bullied by her classmates. She would come home in tears, asking her mother why they were different. With a lump in her throat, the mother would say, "You're strong, my love. Always remember, we're different because we know how to fight. One day, you'll see that's what makes us special." Despite the difficulties, her daughter excelled academically. She was curious and determined, always bringing home books borrowed from the library and asking questions that filled her mother with pride. Recognizing the girl's potential, the mother did everything she could to encourage her, using the little money left over to buy school supplies and other small things that could aid her learning. Even without great resources, the mother planted in her daughter the seed that knowledge could be her most powerful weapon against injustice and adversity. Years passed, and the mother, once left without direction, now had a clear purpose: to give her daughter a chance at a future. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny saved had a single goal: to ensure her daughter had opportunities she herself had never had. With each hardship overcome, the bond between the two grew stronger, creating a unique companionship. They were partners, friends, an unbreakable family. Over time, her daughter also matured emotionally. She increasingly understood her mother's effort and the burden of responsibilities she carried to keep them alive. Determined to repay all the sacrifices, the girl promised herself that she would do everything possible to become someone her mother could be proud of. Instead of weakening her, their struggles gave her unbreakable strength, shaping a courageous and determined young woman. With time, the daughter found solace in something unexpected: music. At school, she discovered a natural talent for singing and soon joined the choir. Music became an outlet, a way to express all the pain, hope and love she carried inside her. The mother, moved when she heard her daughter sing for the first time, realized that her daughter had something special, something that could lead them to a better life. The mother began to seek small opportunities for her daughter to perform at local events. Although modest, these moments were important for the girl's self-esteem and gave her a glimpse of what could be a bright future. Over time, her daughter's talent started to attract attention, and the mother knew this was only the beginning of a new journey. The early years of hardship taught mother and daughter the value of every small achievement. In a life full of difficulties and uncertainty, any glimmer of growth was a spark of hope they both held on to tightly. As the daughter's musical talent blossomed, the mother saw in it a chance to escape their life of deprivation. Though it was only a distant dream, she devoted herself entirely to supporting her daughter, as a way to make up for all the hard times they had endured together. The daughter, for her part, displayed a natural gift for music. Gradually, her talent began to stand out, not only at school, but also in local events. The mother saved every penny she could to allow her daughter to attend singing lessons and performances. Music became a refuge for both of them, something that transcended financial limitations and daily struggles. She didn't just sing. Through her notes, she conveyed all the strength and resilience she had learned to cultivate from a young age. Over time, this passion transformed into a refined and captivating talent. At one of these events, held in a small town square, the daughter caught the attention of a renowned music teacher visiting to judge a competition. He noticed something special about the girl, something that went beyond a talented voice. There was a depth in her performances that moved him. After the performance, he approached the mother and daughter, asking more about their story. He listened attentively as they shared the struggles they had endured, and was deeply impressed by the mother's dedication to supporting her daughter's dream, despite all the challenges. "This girl has a bright future," he said to the mother, "with a serious and emotional look, but she needs support and a platform that goes beyond what any small town can offer." Recognizing the magnitude of the girl's talent, he offered her free lessons to prepare for a major music competition in another city. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. And the mother felt a mix of gratitude and anxiety. She knew that such a step could open doors to the world she had always dreamed of for her daughter, but she feared the competition and the challenge might be too great. The following weeks were filled with intense practice. The daughter dedicated herself wholeheartedly, learning not only vocal techniques, but also how to handle the pressure and responsibility of representing her town and school. On the day of the competition, the mother was by her side, holding her hand before she took the stage. Looking at her daughter, she remembered all they had overcome to get there and felt her heart race. She knew that regardless of the outcome, they had already won just by reaching that point. When the girl began to sing, the audience fell silent. Her voice filled the auditorium, laden with emotion and sincerity. Sitting in the front row, the mother couldn't hold back tears as she listened to the performance. Her daughter was singing for everyone, yet deep down, it felt as though those notes were dedicated to her, the mother who had always been by her side. At the end of the song, the silence of the audience was broken by a wave of applause that seemed endless. The girl hadn't just stood out, she had won the hearts of everyone there. The competition brought the daughter her first major recognition. She won first place and, with it, a scholarship to a prestigious music school in another city. For the mother, this was the opportunity they had both been waiting for, though the thought of being apart from her daughter made her heart ache. She knew this was the chance for her daughter to grow and build a different, safer and happier life. With tears in her eyes, she encouraged her to accept the scholarship and move forward. The following months were challenging. The mother took on even more work to support her daughter's studies, as she now devoted herself entirely to music. Despite the distance, their connection remained strong. With every phone call, the mother felt renewed, hearing her daughter's excitement about the new opportunities that were coming her way. She knew the sacrifices she made were worth it, and that her daughter's success was her own success as well. With the chance to grow in a professional environment, the daughter's talent flourished even more. Her determination and skill opened doors that had once seemed impossible. She began participating in larger performances until her story reached the ears of a producer who saw in her the potential for national success. He invited her to an audition in an even larger city, where renowned artists were launched. With her mother's support, the young woman accepted the challenge, coming closer and closer to realizing her dream. This new opportunity led to a contract, and soon the daughter found herself in studios, recording songs that quickly became popular. Her voice, once limited to small stages and town squares, now captivated thousands of listeners. In interviews, she always made a point to mention her mother and the story that connected them. She shared memories of cold nights, financial struggles, and the unwavering support she had received. In no time, the young woman became recognized not only for her talent, but also for her story of resilience. For the mother, watching her daughter achieve such success was the greatest reward she could have hoped for. She knew that every sacrifice, every exhausting night of work had contributed to that moment. Even without great resources or connections, she had managed to transform her daughter's life through love and dedication. The young woman had become an inspiration to many, a living proof that with effort and support, adversity could be turned into triumph. Together, though separated by distance, mother and daughter remained united by a bond that nothing could break. Their story was now known by many, and each time the daughter took the stage, she felt that her mother was there, by her side, holding her hand and giving her the strength to face anything. Years of dedication and perseverance had finally brought the daughter to a place she and her mother had once only dreamed of. Now recognized for her talent, her music played on radio stations, social media, and major stages across the country. Her name became synonymous with resilience and skill, and in every performance her songs and interviews left no doubt about the pivotal role her mother had played in her journey. Their connection soon became one of the most talked about stories in the media, sparking curiosity in many. Television shows and magazines covered their story, the mother who sacrificed everything to ensure her daughter had a dignified future, and the daughter who, in gratitude, honored those sacrifices at every stage of her career. The media portrayed mother and daughter as an inspiring symbol of struggle and strength, deeply touching the public. In one interview, when asked about her childhood and difficult times, the daughter spoke with emotion about how her mother had faced every hardship to keep them together and safe. "My mother is the true hero of this story," she said, her eyes shining with pride and gratitude. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, is because of her support and love. She taught me to never give up, no matter how hard things get." Her powerful words moved the audience, and the interview video quickly spread, touching thousands of people. The story of mother and daughter gained even more prominence, and the image of the two of them side by side, smiling and celebrating their triumph over adversity, became a symbol of perseverance. The mother, who had always avoided the spotlight and focused on hard work and a simple life, was now revered and admired across the country. With the daughter's growing success, invitations to events and awards began pouring in, and she made sure her mother was by her side for each one of these moments. At one prestigious event, where the daughter was to be honored as one of the year's most influential artists, the mother held her daughter's hand with a mix of pride and shyness, and she never imagined that one day they would stand side by side in such a grand setting, surrounded by people who respected and admired them. The event was broadcast live, and the public watched with great interest the story of the woman who had endured hunger and cold, but who, out of love, never gave up on seeing her daughter succeed. When called to the stage to receive the award, the daughter invited her mother to join her. The auditorium filled with applause, and before the cameras and audience, the daughter delivered a speech that would echo in everyone's minds. "I am grateful to many people, but above all I am grateful to my mother, who taught me to have courage and to fight for my dreams. She is the reason I am here today, and everything I do is for her. She gave me everything when she had nothing and showed me that true love is the greatest gift anyone can offer." Her words were met with tears and warm applause. The mother, visibly moved, could barely contain her joy and gratitude. She was not used to being the center of attention, but in that moment, she felt the weight of her daughter's pride and admiration. She felt honored, and all the difficult nights, the sacrifices and the fears finally made sense. The impact was immediate. On social media, videos of the speech spread rapidly, and their story soon became the focus of a campaign about resilience and inspiration. Mother and daughter were seen as symbols of strength, and their story was cited as an example of how love and perseverance can overcome even the harshest challenges. This success, however, did not go unnoticed by the father, the man who had cast them out of his life without remorse years earlier. Now, in a phase of decline and without the financial shine he once had, he followed the news with a mixture of surprise and discomfort. He felt a certain pride in his daughter's success, but the weight of the past and the choices he had made by abandoning them began to reverberate bitterly within him. The images and speeches of mother and daughter in the media reminded him of his own mistake, a wound he had always ignored, but that now seemed exposed for all to see. Increasingly curious and driven by growing guilt, he decided to seek more information about the events and interviews they were giving. In several of them, he saw his daughter mention the man who had abandoned them, without naming him, but making it clear that this abandonment had shaped her strength. This made him shudder, and for the first time in years, he felt the depth of the void he had created by pushing them out of his life. That award night marked a defining moment for mother and daughter. As they celebrated their moment of triumph, he, distant and alone, reflected on the choices that had led him to that point. For the first time, he began to question everything he had once held dear. Sitting in his empty house, surrounded by silence, he realized that the success and wealth that had once been his goal no longer held any meaning. The regret grew uncontrollably. Ever since he had seen his daughter and ex-wife on TV, the millionaire had been gripped by a torment he could no longer ignore. Everything he once believed to be important, the money, the business, the relationships of convenience, now felt empty and meaningless. With each new public appearance of his daughter, the weight of his past choices became heavier. He tried to push away those feelings, but time, now his greatest enemy, seemed determined to remind him of the consequences of his actions. After much reflection, he decided to seek out his daughter. The idea of facing her terrified him, but he believed there might still be a chance for redemption. He rehearsed what he would say, how he would explain the reasons for his cruel decisions, but no justification seemed sufficient. He realized there was only one option left: to ask for forgiveness. He arranged a meeting, reaching out to his daughter through a mutual contact. She agreed to meet, though not without hesitation. In her message, she made it clear that she would be bringing her mother with her. It wasn't a matter of choice. For her, her mother was an inseparable part of that conversation. The meeting was set at a quiet cafe. He arrived early, anxious and restless. He kept glancing at the door, his heart racing, until finally he saw them enter. Mother and daughter appeared with the same dignity he had always dismissed, the strength and serenity of those who had faced the world and won. He tried to maintain his composure, but their mere presence seemed to unsettle him. They sat down in silence, and his daughter's gaze was intense, almost expressionless, while her mother looked at him with a calm that was unsettling. He began to speak, his words faltering. He explained that back then he had been blinded by an unrestrained ambition, that he had believed wealth was all that mattered, and that to him their presence had seemed like an obstacle. "But now I understand that I was wrong," he said, his voice choked. "I was blind, and all I did was destroy everything that truly mattered." The mother listened in silence, her eyes fixed on his face, without any hint of surprise or compassion. She had heard these words before. Years ago she had dreamed that he would someday regret his actions, but time and pain had erased any expectation of redemption. Now hearing those apologies felt like an empty repetition. The daughter, however, seemed to absorb every word, as if they were pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. "You don't know how many times I wished I could go back," he continued, unable to finish the sentence. His daughter leaned forward and interrupted him with a firmness he hadn't expected. "Go back?" she repeated with a faint, bitter smile. "And what would you have done differently?" His silence was her answer, and finally the mother decided to intervene. "There's nothing to go back to. The years have passed and we've moved on," she said, her voice low but laden with an intensity that made him shudder. "You left us behind, with nothing, as if we were a burden. I never asked for your help, I never sought you out, and I never expected anything in return for what we endured. Everything we have, we achieved on our own." Each word was like a blow, and he felt the weight of every single one, but he didn't dare interrupt her. The daughter looked at him again, her gaze firm and resolute. "If you had stayed, do you think I would be the person I am today?" The question caught him off guard. He tried to respond, but she continued. "The abandonment you imposed on us didn't break my mother. She showed me what it meant to be strong, what it meant to never give up, and what it meant to fight for someone you love. Everything I am today is because of her, not because of you." He felt her words like a final verdict. Deep down, he knew he deserved every one of them. "I just want the chance to make up for everything I did, to make peace with you," he said, his voice trembling, but the mother shook her head, her expression unchanged. "Peace? Who told you we're at war? I don't need your forgiveness. Everything we built was despite you, and the forgiveness you seek won't bring back what you threw away." The silence between them was heavy. He looked at his daughter, with a last hope for some kind of understanding. But for her, there was no possible redemption. Finally, she stood up and said, definitively, "You made your choice. I have my life, and my mother will always have my love and gratitude. As for you, I hope one day you understand that sometimes it's too late." The mother also stood, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and without looking back, left with her daughter by her side. The millionaire remained seated, lost in a mixture of regret and helplessness, realizing that time had taken from him the one thing money could never buy back, the love and respect of his family. In that moment, he understood that all his achievements were hollow, and that in the end, he was as alone as he had always feared he would be. The door closed, and the weight of solitude enveloped him completely. He understood that the emptiness he had tried to fill with wealth and status would never be satisfied. The two women he had once considered a burden had moved on without him, achieving everything he had always dismissed. Now he was nothing more than a shadow in their past, a bitter memory that no longer haunted them. Mother and daughter left the cafe, feeling a weight finally lifted from their hearts. For them, the confrontation had closed a long, painful chapter. They knew now, once and for all, that they didn't need anything from the past. Every step they had taken to get to this point was the result of the strength and love that had united them and continued to be the foundation of the life they were building together. From that day on, the daughter devoted herself even more to her career, with a firm purpose to honor what she and her mother had achieved. Their story continued to inspire thousands, and in every interview, the daughter spoke of her mother's sacrifices with gratitude and love. Mother and daughter were frequently invited to events and seminars on resilience, where they shared the importance of never giving up. They became a symbol of strength and perseverance for many. On one such occasion, they were invited to launch a book that recounted their story, written together. The book, titled Unbreakable, detailed every stage they had overcome, from the initial struggles to the peak of the daughter's career. The book quickly became a bestseller, reaching people of all ages, who found in its pages a reminder that even in the hardest circumstances, love and determination can change lives. The mother, who once avoided the spotlight, now embraced the opportunity to share her experience and support others facing similar struggles. She and her daughter dedicated part of their time to a social project that helped single mothers and children in vulnerable situations, providing educational, material, and emotional support. For them, helping other families going through the same hardships was a way to give back for the support they had received and to give their journey an even greater purpose. While mother and daughter celebrated each new achievement, the father, on the other hand, remained trapped in a solitary existence. The luxurious mansion he lived in now felt vast and empty, each detail a silent reminder of what he had lost. The elegantly decorated rooms no longer brought him pleasure, and the wealth that had once been his greatest treasure now seemed meaningless. Each expensive item he had bought, each contract he had signed, no longer filled the emptiness he felt. With time, his life became a monotonous cycle of business meetings that no longer satisfied him. Even surrounded by influential people, he experienced a loneliness that consumed him. The distance from his wife and daughter had made him realize that the true value of life wasn't found in material possessions, but in the bonds he had destroyed out of selfishness and ambition. He finally understood that what truly matters can't be bought. Months passed, and he watched from afar as his daughter's star continued to rise, shining in a way he could never reach. With each new success, each project the mother and daughter accomplished together, he felt a pang of regret. He knew they would never include him in their lives again, and now all he had left were memories and the what-ifs that haunted his mind. One day, flipping through a magazine, he found an article about his daughter and the social project she and her mother had founded. The article included photos of the two of them, smiling, surrounded by children and families who admired them deeply. There was a peace and a genuine joy in their expressions that affected him profoundly. He closed the magazine, feeling the weight of the decision he had once made, and understanding, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of his choices. For mother and daughter, however, the past was finally where it belonged, distant and without power over their lives. That meeting in the cafe had closed a chapter, and they now moved forward without resentment, certain that everything they had endured had made them who they were. Together they knew there was no obstacle they couldn't overcome. They had weathered the worst storms and through it all had grown stronger. Now they looked toward the future with hope and gratitude. Together, they continued to inspire the world with their story, reminding everyone that true strength doesn't come from wealth, but from the love and resilience that keep us moving forward, no matter what. Their journey, full of pain and triumph, became a beacon for those needing living proof that, with courage and unity, it is possible to transform hardship into victory.